I'll see you in the land of Mordor. Death awaits you at the border. Pass on through the gates of fun, destroy the ring of power.
Welcome back to the channel, all you Lord of the Rings fans, whether you're Middle-earth role-playing or Lord of the Rings strategy battle game, or Lord of the Rings fans in general. Today we're obviously going to be looking at Minas Tirith, 2007 of the series. This came out in 1994, part of the second edition. This video took a long time to make because I was in a pretty cool place. Drove all the way to Quebec City, and on the way we took a detour and stopped at Fort Lennox, which is on the Richelieu Valley, in the Richelieu Valley, along the Richelieu River, and it flows down into Lake Champlain. Familiar with the French Indian Wars or the 7 Years' War, you'll know that this was an invasion route. Fort Lennox is a pretty cool looking fort. It's on an island, so you have to take a ferry to get there, and it dominates the mouth of the Richelieu, pretty much, before it flows into Lake Champlain. So we went there. We also stopped at the Plains of Abraham. The British under Wolfe defeated the French under Montcalm. Both commanders died, which is pretty rare in a battle. In the Plains of Abraham, there's really not much on there. It's smaller than I thought it would be because of urban creep. But it still was pretty cool to be in Quebec City. Anyone who's been there, it's a pretty old. The old city is nice. Also, one other housekeeping note: I had a request for another module, the Harshandet module. This is a fan-based module that was created probably in the late 90s, early 2000s, when you had Mert fan modules. You had fans making these modules. I do have a copy. I downloaded one. And eventually, it's going to take time because I'm going through the original series. We'll get to that module. Now, Minas Tirith is the second edition, but unfortunately it is a carbon copy of the first edition. There are no real changes to anything, which really sucks. I was hoping they would do more. But anyway, let's go down to the table and take a peek. Alright, so back down to the table we are. As you can see more closely, the artwork is exactly the same. It's the Agnes McBride artwork. You'd think they could have used a different one, but I do like the Agnes McBride one. It's pretty cool. You can see Grond in the background. I think Grond was too big in the Peter Jackson movie. It was ridiculously big and would have been hard to maneuver. But this one might be too small, so pick your poison. Now, the first difference is in the maps. You can see the original map. Pretty cool there, nothing out of the ordinary. But then in the second edition, actually made it bigger. So you got the one end with the gate. So they made it. The only problem with that is now you have to slowly connect the dot to make it evened out, right? But they did make this bigger. I don't know why they just didn't make one complete fold out in this map. Instead of doing it that way with two sides, they could have just made one big fold out map. But the drawback to this map is that there's nothing. It's blank on this side, which I thought was a mistake. They could have added more to it. They could have added the townlands and the Ramesacor, which would have been really cool. Because this map actually has Gondor on the other side, but the two maps don't align, which really sucks. They went with an east-west one instead of going a north-south, which would have made more sense, but it is what it is. But yeah, on the second edition, they could have had on the back side of their map the enclosed lands, the encircling lands behind the Ramesacor, and the townlands. Because Peter Jackson's movies, there was nothing between Osgiliath and Minas Tirith. There was no townlands. It was just like prairie scrub almost. So that map really sucked. Now, I was mentioning how I went to Fort Lennox. This is the map, poster map I got. This is actually pretty cool. You can use this. I know it's not shaped like a ship, which is what Cair Andros means, but you can use this type of map as a Cair Andros map. because Tolkien never describes how they fortified it. It had to be fortified during the War of the Ring. It'd be ridiculously stupid not to. So putting a fort or a series of forts, because this is the fort that was built in 1815, was this Fort Lennox. This is on the Canadian side. The American side was down this way, was a couple of miles downstream on Lake Champlain. And Fort Lennox controlled the Richelieu River. Well, think of this as, this is Carandros, so you got Echthelion on this side and Narion on that side. And they even give different time frames. The first British fortification with dockyards over here, which is really cool, hard to see. They have the French fortifications, which were really extensive. And then another first British fortification without the dockyards. So Carandros was probably extensively fortified, but didn't have a large garrison. So that's something they could have did with the map for Minas Tirith. They could have put the fortifications of the Ramessakor or even Carandros. It would have been really nice to see. But let's go through this. This is basically a carbon copy of the original book. There's nothing really new. Nice picture there. Contents introduction, the Citadel series using Minas Tirith. The temporal settings. The City of the Sun. A history of Minas Tirith. The Tale of Years. So Minas Tirith actually has a very boring history in terms of actual warfare. It's never really assailed until the War of the Ring. The Gondorians have always held the line of the Anduin, which was a major obstacle to invasions, right from the War of the Last Alliance all the way up to the War of the Ring, when Sauron finally forced the crossing and assailed the city directly. So it's kind of not an exciting place to go. The city lands, the Pelennor, the Harlan, the Noah Ekor. Yeah, I don't know why they didn't expand this map and include all this with the Harlan and the city lands around it. It would have been really good. But this book does give you a picture of what the Harlan might have looked like. The port of Minas Tirith, because ocean-going ships could reach that far. They could dock in Osgiliath. Yeah, roads, farmsteads, so a typical farmstead. So there'd be farms and little villages dotting the Pelennor fields. Then we go to the White Mountains, Anduin riverbanks, flora, fauna, local agriculture. So a lot of the fresh produce from the city actually comes from the Pelennor. Anorion itself, the province, which is Minas Tirith, is part of the province, is very populous. There's a lot of people living in that area. Fishing from the river, obviously. Herbalism, okay, yeah, in the mountains. Wild beasts and birds, not many of those. Wild plants, culture and lifestyle. So you have the home life, customs, etiquette, dress, life custom, city laws, dress, again, food and drink, the spiritual life of the Dunedain. So they're very Dunedain in their outlook. And you get a glimpse of that when Pippin is befriending Baragon and his son, Birgil. You have commerce. I like how they give a money table, because that's something they never talk about in Lord of the Rings is money. Only in the Shire did they really talk money. After that, they don't carry money anywhere. Seems like elves don't use money. They get free food and lodging in Rivendell. They get free food and lodging out in Lorien. They're given lots of provisions in both places. Then in Minas Tirith, Pippin's not paying for anything. In fact, he joins the guard, so he must get paid something. You know what I mean? Like, their money's not really a big thing. It only seems to be that when Frodo leaves the Shire, he brings money with him to Bree. That's about as far as it goes. You have commerce, though. The inhabitants. So the royal family is still a thing. So this is obviously the 1645 era. Breaks down what goes on. The king, he's got the king's commander in the army, the court advisors who are counselors, and then the officials, clerks. So king's commander, lord high justice, king's curates, king's seer, king's physician, king's treasurer, king's herald. Nothing new there. So you have a lord high justice, and then the law courts. The Anorians, there'd be some noble houses. Pippin, he notices how many great noble houses had simply disappeared, because there are names on the doorways of several deserted houses. But it gives a list of some of the more notable noble families and the great families. A lot of noble families disappeared during the Civil War between Castamir the Usurper. You gotta remember, a lot of noble families became extinct during the Civil War, especially after the Battle of the Crossings of Arui, when the army of Castamir the Usurper was defeated by Eldacar. So a lot of them went extinct from that battle. Then the great families were men who proved their worth after that battle and beyond, as well as the Great Plague would have killed out a few families as well. You have the fellowships. So obviously cities have different things than most farmlands. You have the porters and door wardens, the hostelers, the lamprights, bakers, healers, armorers, stone wrights, wood wrights, goldsmiths, clothsmiths, watersmiths, glassmakers. The water wrights are the guys who make sure the water flows smoothly throughout the city, like fresh drinking water, and clearing out all the unpleasant stuff. Glassmakers, obviously. So you got street traders, cooks, coopers, which make barrels, candle makers, tilers and roof wrights, which would be important in a city, potters, ironsmiths, leather wrights, cord wrights, which make rope, cutlers, knives, forks, spoons type idea, plates, jewelers, artists, embroiderers, locksmiths, scribes, and sages. So there's lots of different fellowships in this. They'd have all their own guilds, and this goes into the various sections of those guys. So with the Kingsguard and City Watch, because Minas Arnor and later Minas Tirith would have a large presence, the Royal Army would, as well as the Kingsguard. The Kingsguard is the elite, while the army is in charge of mainly the Citadel. There are 4 companies, each headed by a commander. Each company consists of 3 to 4 troops led by a captain. The troops composed of 60 to 100 men ordered into 20-man lines. So the first company, for example, is 2 5-line troops of heavy cavalry. That means there are 200 heavy cavalry in the city. It also has 2 4-line troops of heavy infantry, which means there are 160 heavy infantry in the first company. The second company has 2 4-line troops of heavy infantry, so again 160, and 1 4-line troop of medium cavalry, which would be 80. Third company would be 2 4-line troops of medium cavalry, so again 160, and 2 4-line troops of archers, so 160 archers. The fourth company would have 1 3-line troop of heavy mounted archers, so 60 guys, 1 4-line troop of miners, so medium infantry, so there'd be 80 of those guys, and 1 4-line troop of engineers, so medium infantry, so again 80 guys. So there's roughly 1,100 fighting men, 73 officers, another 20 or so staff. So that's a small army for a city, and mainly centered around the front walls. The King's Guard, there are 2 troops of 6 lines each, making 240 men in the King's Guard. I imagine during the War of the Ring, Denethor would have had much the same thing, maybe reduced to 120 men. And it gives an idea how they're broken down in the equipment. It gives a description of what they're wearing, which is nice. City patrols, which are part of the Porters and Door Wardens Fellowship. They join the Citadel Guards in groups of 4 or more if there is known to be trouble abroad to answer the complaints of citizens. So they're also that's the Door Wardens. They're like the cops. The bureaucracy. So you have administrations, the royal offices, the office of the bursary, which is kind of like the treasury, office of estates, office of decrees, office of works, and the haste post. Now, because of the time frame after the Great Plague, they also have wooden towns refugees. So they have a refugee camp. By the War of the Ring, there wouldn't be a refugee camp. There would have been refugees from Echthelion long ago, but they would have resettled in Anorian and Pilar in Lebanon, as well as elsewhere. By the War of the Ring, any non-combatants were sent to the mountains, were sent off to Losanark and into the mountain strongholds. Power and politics, the royal authority, gives a list of the kings and stewards and when they ruled. The conclave, which is like the great council of Minas Tirith. The prince presidency, which before the royal house came to live in Minas Tirith, the king would appoint his own person, like either a person in the royal family or in a noble house who look after Minas Tirith. Organizations of the fellowships, the secret society, so they have a blood ring of sorcerers, practitioners of the magic arts, which Tolkien never really deals with. Order of the Rising Sun, which are the healers and artists. The College of Spoken Word, which are the sages, and the Rogues Fellowship, which is more of a thieves. Even in an ordered society like the Dunedain, there would be a thieves society. Be very small. Finally, we get to the city overview and the outer wall. So the outer wall is of great height and marvelous thickness. The hard, dark, curving rampart is tall and smooth, unconquerable by steel or fire. So it's dark. The first wall is actually darker. The other walls are white. Mighty blocks of granite are raised into position, sheathed in timber, and each square foot of the outer surface encased in fire with an old wooden brush. So they got it to fire harden it. And then go. So it talks about how the walls, how big they are, how much you can walk on them. Tolkien does describe the walls in the Return of the King. The layout, the firing ports, the great gates. Now they have 2 barbicans. Peter Jackson actually has it more like the gate is in more of an interior. There's no towers beside it. It's more of the wall jutting out. So a difference of design. The inner walls, the lesser gates, other watchtowers, the streets, the water supply and sewers. People don't think about it, but sewers are definitely water supply and sewers are 2 of the biggest things. With the White Mountains being where they are, fresh water would not have been a problem for Minas Tirith during the War of the Ring. Food might have been a problem, but they could be resupplied over the mountains. There are probably passes through the White Mountains, difficult, but doable. Which is probably one of the reasons why the Witch King decided to batter his way through each gate. I don't know how he was going to get past the second gate, simply because Grond wouldn't be the size of, especially in the Peter Jackson way, the size of Grond would not have been able to move through the streets. And using trolls to batter it down with hammers wasn't going to work either. I don't think so. One of the minor plot holes in that one. But then again, it doesn't really describe in Lord of the Rings how the Witch King was going to get to the second level either. Alright. We got some of the sites in the levels. First level, second level, third level, fourth level. I'm not going through this. There's just too much information to go through. Fourth level, fifth level, sixth level. Buildings of note. You got the first level, old guest house. Gives a nice description of that. The orrery house. Orrery. Clockwork. Okay. Gives a description of that. The little lock shop. Me and my friends never really ventured into Minas Tirith that much. It's not really an exciting place. Gondor never loses control of it. The only time you could do anything real was during the time of Castamir the Usurper. So the Civil War. The Palace of Light. Second level, you have the Hall of Wax. So the wax makers. Gives nice little layouts. So the second level, you have the Hall of Wax. The little descriptions here, like the little layouts you can use anywhere. The Great Bakery, that's kind of cool. That's a cool design, actually, the layout. And it shows where these are in terms of what you're looking for. One of the noble houses, House Harniston. A studio for an artist, okay. So it's right here on the map, and it looks pretty. It's on a corner street, which is kind of cool. The Woodwright's house, it's on the second level. Third level, you have the Mortar Hall, because a city like that would need people to fix buildings, so there'd be mortar. Make all the concrete. The House of Memorials for the tombs, like stone rites and stuff. Make statues, tombstones, whatnot. Inscriptions. The chimneys, old kilns, once offered by the tillers. Okay, so the chimneys are now a place of entertainment instead of being for the Tyler's Fellowship. Okay. The House of Gold and Silver. That'd be a place for thieves to go after. Great Hall of the Guard. So that's the House of Gold and Silver here. Great Hall of the Guard. Now that's pretty cool. I like that one. Master Weaponsmith, Jeriad the Sharps. Okay. Then we go up to 4th level. Miles Vitrine, which is an odd shape. Okay. Yeah, some of these are all Merc creations, obviously. Never. The Office of Estates up on the. So a lot of designs. Water Rights Hall. So that's your plumbers and your whatnot, making sure that everything works properly in the water supply system. Very important job. They don't get enough credit. People who do the waterworks. Halls of Learning, so they're Rin Thaneth. So like your university library type idea. The Glassworks, another important thing. The Leaden House, so lead, which has been abandoned according to this one. So this is like the Plague era after the Civil War. The Bookbinder, the Die Makers, Hall of Books, the Great Shelves. This is a cool design for a library. Rooms of Secret Lore. Yeah, just going through this really quick. Like, it's such a big book, you can't go through it all. The House of Tapestries, important things. Houses of Healing, which are mentioned in Lord of the Rings. So it's obviously a good location. That's the other thing. They don't really describe too many of the buildings in Minas Tirith. Like Pippin goes some places, but not that many. And the Houses of Healing are one of the bigger, more talked about, because that's where Aragorn goes to heal people from the Black Death and does what he can. Eowyn's there, Faramir's there, Merry's there. Now, Trimbrel the Ratter. So Merp was thinking of a ratter. Peter Jackson did that too when he created his Minas Tirith set. Peter Jackson's Minas Tirith set was amazing. It was undoubtedly, it was great. We never got to see what Ralph Bakshi would have created for Minas Tirith. And don't really get to see the Rankin Bass one either. But Peter Jackson did a phenomenal job creating a realistic Minas Tirith. And they even had a ratter. A ratter would be very important. People wouldn't think that, but keeping the rat population down also keeps things like plague down. Chamber of the Conclave, where the meeting halls are. House of Ringing Sounds. It's for the armorers. Great Hall of Feast, the Marathon. Well, that's kind of cool. The Rath Dinnin. The Rath Dinnin. So the Halls of the Dead, the Hallows. So they would have, Minas Tirith would have its own cemetery. Depending on how rich you are and how great you are. Depends on where you're buried. So obviously the royal family and the Stuarts and the great houses are buried within the Rath Dinnin. While the Fen Holland would have the common graveyard. Then you get the lower barracks. This is accommodating the 3rd and 4th companies of the Citadel. You go up to the 7th level. You get the High Court. The upper barracks, which holds the other two, the 1st and 2nd companies of the guard. And then the Hall of Isildur. The Palace of the Fountain. The White Tree, which is still sitting there. The High Hall. Rooms of the Household. So it's the government. The Tower of Echthelion, which later becomes the Tower of Echthelion. The Hall of the Palantir. And then the city in other times. This is where we get to the Kinstrife, which Minas Tirith would have been more active as far as, are you a loyalist or are you one of the rebels? Or the royalist versus the loyalist. I don't know how you would do it. The two sides of the coin. You had the War of the Ring, and then into the 4th Age. So there's really not much you can do. The Great Plague would also bring opportunities for minor stuff. You're never going to overthrow the government. And then it goes people of note regarding the royal family. So this one is strictly a 1645. The royal family of King Tarandor and Vinarion. So after the Great Plague. And the royal family that lives currently within the walls. Royalty has shaped the city. You have Venarian, Aranor, Echthelion the First, and Echthelion the Second. Denethor's family, so you have Denethor, Boromir, and Faramir. Makes me wonder what would have happened if Boromir had lived. Had he not gone to Rivendell? Had he stayed behind? And Faramir went? it would have ended better. But also, in a sense, would Faramir have been sent to Pelargir to lead the defense there? Because usually they wouldn't have both been in Minas Tirith. Doesn't make any sense. You need someone in Pelargir, which might be one of the reasons why the city fell. Then it gets into some minor details like courtiers, who's around, city's nobility. These are all merp creations. Powerful Anorians, the wealthy and influential, noted fellowship members. So these are all NPCs that you can go talk to in adventure settings. The adventures were kind of weak. I thought a spy from Umbar. That makes sense that there would be spies from Umbar circulating within the city. Haradrim would not be a good spy, because unless they're a part of an embassy, they wouldn't be allowed to go through the city itself, or they'd be very noticeable. Anyone from Harad or Dunland but a spy from Umbar makes perfect sense, and you can use that in any timeline. So places, the tasks, the encounters. It's a pretty big story. You have a ride in Wooden Town, so minor. That's only during the Great Plague. And maybe you could also put that in after the abandonment of Echthelion. I do like how they give the Wooden Town right outside Minas Tirith, though by the War of the Ring that's long gone. There's a task, encounters. So there's more opportunities in the refugee camp than there is in the city itself. I never played any of these adventures. The Secret of the Ring, which is about spellcasters and mages, wasn't really our thing, so we never did it. A haunted house, so that's more interesting. With some of the abandoned houses, you would wonder, but the Dunedain aren't much for spirits and ghosts. So again, more likely it's somebody pretending to be a ghost. But this one says the Lodge's ghosts were Eldacar supporters, executed by the usurper Casimir's orders nearly 200 years ago. Okay, a little bit on the far side of how Tolkien thought, but it'd be interesting. The Emerald's cursed, so a cursed emerald. Yeah, you have a vampire. Again, not something that you see a lot in Tolkien's world, not in the Second and Third Age. First Age vampires were a little more common, but not much. I think it's only mentioned once Sauron could be a vampire, but there was also a messenger as well who was vampiric. Returning goods. Finally adapting this module, so you get conversion charts, lesser NPC table. This comes right out of the Arnor book. I don't know why they have that there. So all the NPCs you can find in the city and in the adventures. Tables map, master military table. The city guard. Doesn't mention how many city guard members there are, but the actual royal army, the commanders, captains, men-at-arms, archers, and horses, does go give you a detailed description of how many there are. So you have 1,100 soldiers plus another 240 royal guardsmen. Small garrison for the city that size. But there would also be, but because it's not in a war zone, it's during the Great Plague, so the numbers are reduced. And during the War of the Ring, the garrison would have swelled easily 10 times. During the War of the Ring, every male between the ages of 18 to 70 would have been in the army, would have been drafted or voluntold, and they would have joined, they would have had to serve. It would have been conscription. Now this is what I like. They put the diagram of Rath Pelennor, but they don't describe how many guys are there. So there are 2 royal lord captains, royal knights, and it says these old royal knights, so there must be more than one. So these old royal knights command 3 to 7 companies, each of about 100 men. So that means anywhere from 300 to 700 men in each company. How many lord captains there are, I do not know. So the captains, they command companies of 100 men. So the ring sergeants, which are kind of like the more experienced sergeants, kind of like in Roman army you had the centurions, but you also had one that was the first centurion. I forget the name now. It'll come to me one day. Sergeants, men-at-arms, and you have the servants and all that stuff. Encounters, so the chance of an encounter in all the levels, including the Wooden Town, Pelennor, and Harlan, which I like. And then it gives you the stats in Rollmaster. and the Lord of the Rings adventure game, the second one they came out with. Conversion notes, traps, the appendices. Now this is something that's not in the original book, but they give you a break of different sector maps that you really don't need. And then finally a price guide and what's coming up. So there we have it, the Minas Tirith book. Alright, so that was my look at Minas Tirith 2nd edition. It's basically the same as 1st edition. If you want to go back and look at my 1st edition video on this one, it's pretty much the same thing, unfortunately. But this is a direction that 2nd edition was going with Citadels. There are more Citadel books out there. And it's hard to judge because I wish they had done more. They could have did a different timeline. They could have added more layouts at the back of the big poster map. Like I said, they could have put the Ramus Echor and the Pelennor Fields on the back of the city map. And maybe even Osgiliath or Carandros, which would have been really nice. They could have added more of the military tables for the army of the Pelennor. And created slightly better adventures or more adventures. But anyway, all you Middle-earth role-playing fans out there, let me know if you guys have this book, if you're able to play it. And what changes do you think they should have made from 1st edition to 2nd edition? Leave comments in the comment section. Until next time, I am Romantic, and I'm out of here.